Mist rolled over Penobscot Bay like a stage curtain as Port Claw readied itself for its 75th annual Maine Lobster Festival. Red bunting flapped from weather-beaten wharves, the scent of drawn butter clung to the air, and every shop window offered some variation on a crustacean pun. None of these details mattered, as much as the crown. 12 deep blue star sapphires, each said to contain a sliver of Atlantic midnight, were secured in a silver circlet that would rest on the head of the Lobster Festival Queen at precisely 8 o'clock Saturday night. Ruby Callahan, junior reporter for the Port Claw Beacon, had been assigned to cover human interest color because the editor assumed the pageant was fluff. But Ruby possessed a hunter's curiosity. She arrived at the makeshift dressing pavilion behind the grandstand shortly after dawn on Coronation Day and persuaded a volunteer guard to let her photograph the famous crown. The jewels glimmered even in the weak morning light. The silver band was scrawled with wave motifs, and the sapphires winked like tide pools. Ruby took her shots, thanked the guard, and tucked her camera into her satchel. Nothing seemed amiss. 7 hours later, everything was amiss. A shriek ricocheted across the pavilion at 3:30 p.m., the kind of sound that made gulls scatter. Ruby rushed inside. Jessie Goddard, this year's front-runner for Queen, stood frozen before the crown's velvet pedestal. Blue crystals lay scattered on the floor, their surfaces chalky, their edges crumbling. A salty dampness stained the velvet. "Somebody swapped the sapphires," Jessie gasped. They're melting." Ruby knelt and touched a shard. It flaked under her fingertip and dissolved on her tongue with a briny sting. Dyed rock salt. Whoever executed the switch had taken the real stones and left painted crystals that couldn't survive coastal humidity. By 4 o'clock, the news had surfaced like a rogue whale. Sheriff Emmett Calder sealed off the pavilion, muttering about fingerprints. The festival board convened in a panic. Crowds milled outside the barricade, hunger for drama overcoming any allegiance to fried dough. Portsiders were blunt folk, and rumors moved faster than tidewater. It had to be a jealous contestant. It had to be the Bangor jeweler who lost the polishing contract. It had to be Cormac Crab Delaney, the fisherman fined by the festival last year for parking his boat where the fireworks barge needed to moor. At 5, the board announced a $10,000 reward for information and postponed the coronation until midnight. Postponing the lobster boat race was unthinkable, so they left that schedule intact, but the race captain's superstitious bunch whispered that a crownless queen meant cursed water. Several threatened to withdraw. A festival without the race meant no spectators. No spectators meant no souvenir sales. No sales meant no donations to the Fisherman's Relief Fund. In Port Claw, that spelled mutiny. Maritime mayhem fermented within minutes. Fishermen argued on the docks. Tourists filmed the arguments. Gulls, delighted by discarded hot dog buns, swooped overhead in squawking squadrons. Someone set off an early firework that rattled windows as far as Sandy Point. In the confusion, a stack of lobster crates tipped off a pier, releasing 200 live crustaceans into the harbor, where they scuttled among boat propellers like armored gremlins. Ruby sensed a career-defining scoop in the chaos. She'd covered bake sales and select board debates for 3 years. This was real. She called her editor, who only said, "Get me something we can print above the fold." She decided to start where the thieves must have started, the pavilion guard. Horace Blodgett, the volunteer watchman, sat glumly in the sheriff's cruiser chewing a toothpick. "Didn't see a soul," he swore. "I took my scheduled break at 11, grabbed a clam roll, came back at 11:30. Crown looked fine then." "You're certain?" Ruby asked. "As certain as a clam in low tide." That left a 45-minute window. Ruby pictured the pavilion, canvas flaps luffing in sea breeze, props and gowns everywhere, contestants rehearsing speeches. Whoever swapped the stones needed privacy, knowledge of jewels, and an escape route. A movement above caught her eye. A herring gull perched on the pavilion roof, holding a blue speck in its beak. When it dropped the morsel, the fragment struck the roof and burst into salty dust. Ruby's pulse quickened. Seagulls didn't eat sapphires, but they would peck at rock salt, especially if it was dyed lobster boy blue. That implied the salt decoys hadn't been removed. They'd been hurled upward, maybe to obscure evidence. She grabbed her telephoto lens and scanned nearby roofs. Blue grains dotted several shingles. Then she saw something stranger. On the roof of wharfside storage, 50 yards away, lay a square plastic bucket labeled Ocean Freeze De-icing Salt. Its lid smeared cobalt. Ruby hurried to the warehouse. The side door was unlocked and smelled of tarred rope. Inside, crates of festival decorations leaned beside stacks of fishing gear stored for off-season. On the floor glimmered a single true sapphire, recognizable instantly by the silky 6-point star inside its depths. The gem must have been dropped in the hurry. She pocketed it, intentions righteous, and stepped deeper into shadow. Voices drifted from behind a stack of folded banners. "Load her after sunset. If we sail by 6, we'll be past the Coast Guard patrol before they even know it's missing. I still say we could get twice the price in Boston," another voice said. "And double the chance of cops. Monhegan's clean." Ruby eased her head around the banner. Festival treasurer Quincy Lowe, a man who'd championed yearly budget cuts for security frills, stood with Maeve Defoe, the Bangor gem dealer who'd lost the polishing contract. At their feet was a buoy-sized waterproof case. Lowe flipped it open, and the remaining 11 sapphires sparkled under a hanging bulb. He shut the lid, snapped 2 padlocks, and nudged the case with his boot. Into the hold of Siren's Lament, trap number 12. Coast Guard will see nothing but lobster pots. Maeve grinned. And by sunrise 12 stones for 12 investors, clean as sea glass. Ruby's heart hammered. Siren's Lament belonged to Crab Delaney moored at Dock C. She calculated, if the thieves loaded the case after sunset, she had maybe 1 hour before the gems vanished into endless Atlantic. She took 2 silent photos and crept backward. Back outside, gulls wheeled against salmon-pink sky. Ruby dialed the sheriff. No answer. The department was likely herding runaway lobsters. She needed help. Jessie Goddard, still in shock, but fiercely competitive, was pacing near the pavilion, muttering lines from her acceptance speech. Ruby explained the theft in rapid whispers, showed the sapphire as evidence, and offered a proposal. "You want me to help steal them back?" Jessie said. "Liberate," Ruby corrected. "You'll get your crown, the town gets its festival, and I get my story. Deal?" Jessie's reply was pure Portclaw pragmatism. "I can drive a boat." They borrowed an outboard skiff from Jessie's uncle, who ran whale watch tours. Ruby phoned the Beacon office and left a voicemail. "Hold page 1, I'm chasing sapphires." Then she tucked her phone in a waterproof pouch and helped Jessie cast off. In twilight jeweled the bay, lobster boats bobbed at anchor like bulky red toys. They aimed for dark sea, weaving between floating picnic coolers, stray buoys, and one inflatable lobster that had escaped a photo booth. Siren's Lament loomed ahead, running lights dark. Voices drifted over the water, Lowe and Maeve again lowering something heavy onto the deck. The girls killed their motor and drifted alongside starboard, unseen. Jessie tossed a line, hooked the rail, and clambered up with gymnast grace honed by years of catching runaway pots midwinter. Ruby followed less gracefully, thumping onto deck planks. They ducked behind stacked traps. Maeve disappeared below with the case. Lowe remained topside, bending to lash a tarp. Jessie winked at Ruby, snatched a coil of rope, stepped behind Lowe, and with surprising calm lassoed his wrists. Lowe yelped. Jessie tightened the knot. "I always wanted to hog-tie a budget committee," she said. Ruby sprinted down the companionway. Dim light flickered from the engine compartment where Maeve knelt before an open trap, fitting the sapphire case inside. "Hands up," Ruby said, voice steadier than she felt. Camera flash held like a badge. "Festival security," Maeve whirled, eyes narrowing. "You're that reporter." She lunged, grabbed a marlinspike and swung. Ruby ducked. The spike cracked a wooden beam. Ruby grabbed a fire extinguisher from its bracket, depressed the lever, and a cloud of foam engulfed Maeve. The gem dealer sputtered and slipped on suds. Ruby slammed the case lid, dragged it toward the stairs. Maeve caught Ruby's ankle. They tussled. The marlinspike clanged to the floor. The case popped open, and 11 sapphires scattered, skittering like blue midnight across the deckplate. Maeve lunged for them, but Ruby tackled her. Both slid across foam, colliding with the bulkhead. Above, a horn blared, the harbour patrol's skiff. Jessie must have signalled them. Boots pounded overhead. Foam dripped. Ruby's lungs burned, but she laughed in relief when Sheriff Calder descended the ladder, cuffs gleaming. "So, you decided to answer your phone," Ruby wheezed. Calder surveyed the mess, expression equal parts bewilderment and admiration. "Heard something about lobsters hijacking a boat. Figured it had to be you." Outside, chaos amplified. Word of the arrest spread down the waterfront, warping with every telling. By the time Calder marched Lowe and Maeve up the gangplank, rumours claimed they'd been running a sapphire for crab leg cartel. Children cheered. Someone set off another firework. The sheriff collected statements, secured the gems, plus the loose 12th stone Ruby produced, and promised an evidence bag the size of New Hampshire. He praised Jessie's rope skills and offered Ruby first interview rights. Yet a new problem surfaced. 6 sapphires were missing, lost during the scuffle. They might have rolled through bilge grates into the harbour. Without all 12, tradition forbade coronation. Crowds were already restless. Ruby refused to let Portclaw sink under superstition. She rallied volunteers. Jessie rallied contestants. And together they swept Siren's Lament, inch by inch, then scoured the dock with flashlights. They found 1 stone wedged behind a cleat, 2 more in a coil of line, another in Jessie's boot cuff. That left 2 unaccounted. Midnight neared. Foghorns bellowed impatience. Then a shout from the water, "Something glitters!" A teenage deckhand wearing goggles surfaced, holding a sapphire in each hand. He'd been diving for runaway lobsters when he glimpsed moonlight flicker below. Miracles, Ruby decided, sometimes wore wetsuit neoprene. At 11:55, the reunited dozen sapphires were hustled to the pavilion, wiped on microfiber and slotted back into their silver crowns. Sheriff Calder escorted the circlet himself, a lobster trap under each arm for barricade effect. The pageant director, face tear-streaked with relief, fastened the crown atop Jessie Goddard's curls at 12:03 to thunderous applause. Tradition bent slightly to accommodate a queen crowned after midnight, but no one minded once fireworks gilded the fog. The mayhem subsided as swiftly as it began. Fishermen who'd threatened boycott roared out to the starting line next morning, superstition soothed. Tourists bought record amounts of Keep Calm and Lobster on shirts to commemorate the great sapphire caper. Merchandise featuring Ruby's front-page photo of the recovered crown sold out by noon. A week later, Ruby visited Jessie at the docks. The new queen was helping load crates for a charity clam bake. The crown, minus sapphires, sat in a padded box, the gems locked safely at the Historical Society until a proper display case could be built. "You sure you don't want to wear it everywhere?" Ruby teased. "I got my tiara, my title, and a scholarship," Jessie replied. "That's plenty." She shaded her eyes toward the harbour, where Siren's Lament sat and pounded. "Besides, crowns make people crazy." Ruby nodded. She'd spent the week transcribing interviews, Lowe blaming mounting debts, Maeve citing underappreciated expertise. Both faced federal charges for interstate transport of stolen goods. The Beacon's headlines ran 3 days straight. Ruby's byline finally earned font the size usually reserved for nor'easters. But what lingered with her more than professional triumph was the image of dyed salt crystals dissolving on velvet, the audacity of replacing something priceless with something that vanished at a touch. It felt like a warning whispered by the sea. Value is substance, not shine. Before heading home, Ruby strolled the wharf. The tide was outgoing, revealing palings studded with barnacles. She spotted a speck of blue lodged in a fissure. One last grain of painted salt. She flicked it into the water and watched it melt, carried off like all rumours and storms eventually were, leaving only a briny aftertaste and a story worth telling.